Howdy readers and howdy movie buffs. I'm Jason, this is Chapter and Verse, and this is the latest installment in my year-long project on mortality called You Carry a Coffin Today. And this month we did not read a book, but we did watch a film. And that film was David Lowery's A Ghost Story. This came out just a couple years ago, 2017. David Lowery is the director of a little crime drama called Ain't Them Bodies Saints, which was wonderful. It's one of my favorite movies of the year it came out. He directed the Disney live-action version of Pete's Dragon, which was wonderful. He made A Ghost Story right after filming Pete's Dragon, and he made A Ghost Story kind of in secret. It was not even listed on the Internet Movie Database as a project in development or anything like that until 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks before it was actually released. So nobody even knew that this thing was being made until basically it came out, which makes it a kind of curiosity in more ways than one. So a little synopsis for those of you who have yet to watch it. So A Ghost Story is just a little tiny film. It's 92 minutes long. It's got a very, very small cast. It stars Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara as a young married couple. And he is kind of an experimental musician. It's not clear what she does, although they've got very good taste in books. And you can see some of those on a little TV screen. But when I watched it this second time, I watched it with my friend Dan, and we watched it on our big giant 9-foot movie screen in his in the attic of his garage. So I was able to see a lot more detail than I had the first time I watched it. And yeah, they've got Huckleberry Finn in their house. They have Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively in their house. They have Gabriel Garcia Marquez. They have a really obscure novel called I think it's called Misfortunes by Wesley Stace. I used to have an ARC of that book, and the cover was identical to the one that they have there in the film. And given that Moon Tiger is so much about memory, I feel like the books that David Lowery chose to be in the frame in this movie, which is also very much about memory and being haunted by memory. Having a book like Moon Tiger be essentially kind of part of the wallpaper of the film doesn't feel accidental. I think that David Lowery put everything in there with a purpose and for a reason. So this young married couple, played by Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, right near the beginning of the film, he dies in a car accident. So I'm not really spoiling anything. It is called A Ghost Story after all. And when she is pulled into the hospital to identify his body, right? An attendant takes her in there. They pull the tray out with his body on it, and they pull the sheet back. She identifies his body, confirms that it's her husband, and she wants to be left alone with his body for a little bit. And so the attendant leaves, and she's just there with the body of her husband on this steel slab in the hospital, the morgue. And David Lowery spends a lot of time with that moment, right? I mean, he really draws it out. She doesn't talk to her husband. She's just present with him. And it lasts, I mean, it feels like it lasts for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm not sure how long it does last. I probably should have timed it. And then she covers him up and she leaves. And then again, he draws that moment out, and we're left just looking at the sheeted body on the table for what feels like a very long time. And then the body sits up with the sheet draped over it, right? Just like you see here on the cover of the film. And it gets up off of the table and it walks out of the room there in the hospital. No one sees it. Everybody around it is completely oblivious to it existing at all. And it walks to the end of the hallway, the ghost does, walks to the end of the hallway in the hospital, and a bright white light opens in the wall at the end of the hallway. And we get the sense that this is the ghost's opportunity to walk into eternity, right? To step into heaven, essentially. And instead, the ghost turns and the opening of light closes off. And the ghost has chosen not to enter into heaven or eternity. And as it turns out, the ghost has made the decision to walk into its own hell. I don't think it knows that at the time. The ghost never speaks. Never speaks in any kind of language, right? It communicates with another ghost in a nearby house. But anyway, the Kieslowski ghost returns home and is doomed to observe his wife's grief. And there's a scene. So their landlord has brought her a pie to eat. Lets herself in, leaves the pie and a note on the table. And then when Rooney Mara's character gets home, she finds the pie. She does some dishes and she finds the pie, and she sits down on the kitchen floor and eats virtually the whole pie. And the ghost is just watching this whole time. And I feel like it was so brave of David Lowery to really communicate the depth of grief and the ways in which we kind of futilely handle grief, right? I mean, we are so ill-equipped to deal with loss and suffering that we latch onto anything in the moment that can make us feel numb, that can engage some sense of ours, whether it's smell or taste, what have you, touch. You oftentimes will hear stories of people who, when they lose their significant other, their spouse, or their boyfriend or girlfriend, that they lose themselves in sort of hollow, meaningless sexual relationships. They need the sensory engagement as a way of just kind of numbing themselves. And for David Lowery to keep the camera on Rooney Mara for a very long time. I mean, it feels like 5 minutes or 6 minutes, and just watching her eat this pie until she can't eat anymore, until she bolts to the bathroom to throw up. I just found it so powerful and so moving, and also just as a scene, I feel like it was kind of novel and revolutionary. I can't imagine many filmmakers sitting around in a planning meeting, discussing a draft of a script or what have you, and somebody says, well, how do we communicate grief? I can't imagine very many directors would say, let's show somebody eating a pie, and let's keep the camera on them the whole time, and then we'll have a man with a white sheet over him and two little ghost eyes like he's on a Charlie Brown cartoon at Halloween, watching in the distance, and we'll make this last for like 6 minutes, and nobody says anything. It's just a woman eating a pie. I can't imagine very many people offering that as a suggestion, and I can't imagine very many investors in a film going along with it. And that's just one of the kinds of things in this movie that feels daring to me, and it feels like an act of faith, an act of real courage on the part of everybody from the director to the cast to the investors in the film. I think that scene is just beautiful and devastating, and one of the best things that's been in a film in many years. So anyway, he's connected to the house, this ghost, and he watches his wife leave. Before she leaves, she puts this bit of paper, tucks it in the wall and paints over it, and she's told him that she did this when she was a child. And he wants to see what's on the paper. He needs to see what's on the paper, but he can't, right? Reality is constantly intruding. There's a new family that moves in, and then another family that moves in, and college students that move in, and he's there forever. We get a sense of eternity. And like I said, I mean, he has chosen his own hell. And one of the things I find fascinating about that idea is we don't even need to look at it as something that happens after death. I mean, how many times do we in our lives choose heavens or choose hells? I feel like we do that on an almost daily basis, actually. We can decide what we want our lives to be governed by, what we want them to be affected by, to what extent we want or will allow ourselves to be haunted. And if we're talking about grief, grief doesn't need to be the mourning of someone who has died, someone who's gone. We grieve the loss of opportunities. We grieve the loss of the lives that we thought we were going to have, but for whatever reason didn't end up with. And I think it's important to remember that that grief is far-reaching, and it's something that is found in a lot of walks of life, a lot of avenues, a lot of situations. So yeah, and thinking about mortality, then I suppose we're not just thinking about death. We are also. It would behoove us to also realize that in considering mortality, we're thinking about opportunities that have passed by the wayside, things that we hoped for, that we planned for, that we worked toward, not happening. Whether that's a career that we wanted and didn't pan out, whether it's a relationship that was the cornerstone of life for us and didn't pan out. For religious people, whether it's their faith, it's worn away, it erodes. And I think it makes absolute sense to grieve the loss of those things. So in the end, yeah, maybe this isn't merely a project about corporeal death, but many kinds of deaths, I suppose. So basically, if you couldn't tell, a ghost story provides a lot of food for thought. It's a little tiny movie, like I said, but it has huge ideas, and it takes a lot of really big creative risks, I think, and for that I applaud it. So if you watched it with me this month, let me know what you thought. By all means, there's a lot more to talk about with it, but it's late and I'm tired, and it's chilly down here, which is why I'm wearing my hat, even though it was like 95 degrees today. Next month in the project, again, we won't be reading a book, but we will be watching the first film in Krzysztof Kieslowski's Three Colors trilogy, and that is Blue, starring Julian Binoche. Love this movie. Haven't seen it in a really long time, so I'm looking forward to watching it again. Looking forward to seeing it on a big screen for the first time up in the attic of Dan's garage. But anyway, I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you guys again very soon. Adios.